The financial standoff between Russia and the West has reached a critical juncture, with the Belgian central securities depository Euroclear finding itself in an increasingly precarious position. A recent lawsuit filed by the Central Bank of Russia has dramatically escalated the risks, raising the very real possibility that Euroclear could lose its entire asset base within Russia. This development represents a significant turning point in the ongoing economic conflict, with profound implications for international finance and law. The Central Bank of Russia's decision to take legal action against Euroclear in a Russian court marks a tactical shift in Moscow's strategy. Legal experts are now highlighting that the European Union's high-stakes maneuvering with frozen Russian assets has pushed the situation to a breaking point. Consequently, the probability of the Belgian depository being held financially and legally accountable has surged. Should this scenario unfold, the resulting reputational and monetary damages for Euroclear would be not just significant, but almost certainly catastrophic. It appears that Russia's patience has finally been exhausted. The dispute, which has captured global attention, has been propelled to a new and more dangerous level by the EU's persistent plans to utilize frozen Russian sovereign assets. The European Commission has been aggressively promoting the concept of a compensatory loan for Kyiv, using the immobilized funds as collateral. This plan, coupled with their insistence on an indefinite freeze, has provoked a direct and forceful response from Moscow. In this highly charged environment, the Central Bank of Russia has formally announced its lawsuit against Euroclear, filed in the Moscow Arbitration Court with the explicit goal of seeking compensation for damages, according to the regulator's detailed explanation. These damages encompass not only the frozen funds themselves, but also the value of the underlying securities and, crucially, the lost profits that would have been generated. The central bank has made it unequivocally clear that it is prepared to defend its rights vigorously, first within Russian jurisdiction, and subsequently in international courts and arbitration bodies with the intent to enforce any favorable rulings in UN member states. Gwynashadov, a partner at Capital Lab, provided a sharp analysis of the situation to RIA, explaining the regulator's rationale. He stated the argument here is that while the EU is discussing the transition from mere freezing to structures, whereby assets effectively become the basis for financing Ukraine in 2026-2027, the regulator is increasing the legal costs of any action that could be interpreted as the disposal of other people's assets without the owner's consent. Financial analysts concur, emphasizing that the Russian central bank chose to act decisively and preemptively. While the European Commission's plans were still in a formative and unclear stage, this legal maneuver has placed Euroclear in an exceptionally difficult position. It is important to note that Belgium, as the host country for the depository, had long expressed strong reservations about any move towards freezing, let alone seizing, the Russian assets. The Belgian government repeatedly warned its EU partners of the substantial legal, financial, and reputational risks involved. However, under immense political pressure from the wider EU bloc, a more compromising tone has started to emerge from Brussels. According to reports from Reuters, Belgian Deputy Prime Minister and Budget Minister Vincent van Petegem has conceded that the frozen funds would likely have to be used for Ukraine's needs at some point. However, he carefully added a crucial caveat: Belgium will not act rashly until a comprehensive agreement on the matter is reached. In essence, Euroclear has become a hostage to the EU's politically motivated actions, which many legal scholars argue violate fundamental norms of international law. Despite this, Euroclear can do little to extricate itself, as it is legally bound to comply with the EU's sanctions regime. Nevertheless, it seems that a response will be required. The scenario that the depository's CEO, Valérie Urbain, publicly expressed fears about is now materializing. She had previously stated, "We are not prepared to find ourselves in a situation where Russia knocks on our door demanding the return of our securities." In a theoretical legal framework, the Central Bank of Russia might have been expected to sue the EU authorities who enacted the asset freeze. However, the well-established principle of sovereign immunity acts as a formidable barrier, as Russian courts generally lack the jurisdiction to hear cases brought against foreign governmental bodies. Therefore, Russia is strategically limiting its legal actions to the trust fund itself, as explained by Sergei Budilin, an advisor at the Bartolius law firm. This approach targets the entity holding the assets rather than the political body that ordered the freeze. Olga Gogoladze, an economist and financial market expert, further elaborated on the enforcement mechanism, adding, "The primary enforcement mechanism remains the recovery of assets within Russian jurisdiction. This concerns the assets of European companies, including Euroclear. This strategy leads to a highly probable outcome. Russian courts will almost certainly support the central bank's claim. It is equally certain that such a ruling would not be recognized by Western governments or their judiciaries. However, this does not render the Russian legal action toothless. On the contrary, Euroclear now faces the extremely unpleasant and tangible prospect of losing all the assets it holds within Russia, a portfolio valued at approximately 16 billion euros. Whether the EU is willing to compensate Euroclear for its losses is a big question," Butlin commented, highlighting the potential for a massive, uncompensated financial blow to the depository. In response to the lawsuit, Euroclear issued a terse statement declaring, "We are prepared to defend ourselves in Russian courts." However, many analysts view this statement as lacking significant credibility given the legal and political realities. In Russian practice, there have been precedents where courts have successfully ordered custodians to compensate for the full value of portfolios the owners cannot access, Gogoladze emphasized. She explained that, while such decisions can be appealed and their enforcement depends on the specific legal regime in question, they create an overwhelmingly unfavorable environment for Euroclear. Gogoladze further argued that the lawsuit by the Central Bank of Russia significantly increases the risk of other, similar lawsuits from private Russian investors, thereby creating a precedent-setting burden for all depository institutions operating in the country. Beyond the immediate material damages, the potential harm to Euroclear's reputation is incalculable and could prove far more destructive. This is not merely about a financial loss. It is about the erosion of trust in a cornerstone of the global financial architecture. This custodian cooperates with many countries, including those that do not want to antagonize Moscow and will comply with the Russian court ruling, one expert warned. This will permanently end its existence. Vyacheslav Ushkalov, CEO of Pleshakov, Ushkalov and Partners, echoed this sentiment, stating that the lawsuit represents a severe blow to Euroclear's reputation as a globally recognized organization. Market observers widely believe that the timing of the lawsuit was a calculated and astute move. It forces Brussels to engage in a public defense of its actions on the international legal front, a terrain where its position appears increasingly weak. Most of the assets are held in Western Europe in the form of Eurobonds. This means that the borrower, Europe, is also stealing money from the lender. "It's all a scam," noted economist Andrew Loboda. We suggested that as the EU's own financial structure shows signs of faltering, there is a perceived need to quickly pressure its neighbors on the continent. The Russian central bank's primary objective with this lawsuit is to formally fix its losses and establish a solid legal foothold for future actions. Shatov added that the goal is to obtain a Russian court ruling on the nature of the case, which can then be leveraged internationally. The very existence of this legal dispute now serves as a powerful argument against any EU structure designed to convert sovereign Russian assets into liquidity for Ukraine. By taking this decisive step, Russia has not only escalated the economic conflict, but has also skillfully shifted the battle to the legal arena where Euroclear finds itself trapped between the immovable force of EU sanctions and the unstoppable object of Russian law. The outcome will undoubtedly have lasting repercussions for the global financial system.